On the afternoon of October 10th, 1978, a woman calling herself Erica Mary Chambers moved into the 8th-floor apartment of the Anis Asaf building on Rue Verdun, a bustling artery in the sophisticated, Sunni-dominated heart of West Beirut. To her neighbors, she was an unremarkable addition to the building's cosmopolitan menagerie of residents. She was British, in her early 30s, with an unassuming demeanor and a quiet passion for painting. Her presence was explained by a professed love for the Levant and a charitable inclination toward the Palestinian refugee children in the nearby camps, for whom she occasionally volunteered. Her daily routine quickly settled into a predictable and placid rhythm. She would spend her mornings on her balcony, dabbing at a canvas, and her afternoons running errands or visiting local galleries, often returning with a small bag of food for the stray cats that congregated in the alleyway below. This entire existence, from her slightly hesitant French and passable Arabic, to the brand of English tea she imported and the very cats she fed, was a fabrication of breathtaking detail. Erica Chambers did not exist. She was a legend, a carefully constructed identity inhabited by a Kidon, an operative of the Israeli Mossad. And her apartment was not a home, but a meticulously chosen observation post. The silent fulcrum of an operation that had been 6 years in the making. Her sole purpose in Beirut was to watch, to wait, and ultimately to facilitate the death of one man, Ali Hassan Salameh, the chief of operations for the Black September organization and the architect of the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre. The strategic imperative that placed this woman in a Beirut apartment was born from a catastrophic failure and a national trauma that had festered for years. The Munich massacre, in which 11 Israeli athletes and officials were murdered on global television, was not merely an act of terrorism. It was a profound humiliation that struck at the core of the Israeli state's promise to protect its people anywhere in the world. In response, Prime Minister Golda Meir authorized Operation Wrath of God, a clandestine campaign with a single, unambiguous objective: to hunt down and eliminate every individual involved in planning and executing the Munich attack. For years, Mossad teams had methodically tracked and killed their targets across Europe and the Middle East. But Ali Hassan Salameh, nicknamed the Red Prince for his flamboyant lifestyle and high-ranking Fatah lineage, remained untouchable. He was not just another planner. He was the mastermind, the charismatic and brilliant head of Yasser Arafat's personal security force, Force 17, and the linchpin of the PLO's external operations. The problem was compounded by Mossad's most public and disastrous failure. In July 1973, in Lillehammer, Norway, a Mossad team, acting on flawed intelligence, had misidentified and killed Ahmed Bouchiki, an innocent Moroccan waiter, believing him to be Salameh. The fallout was catastrophic. Several Israeli operatives were arrested by Norwegian authorities, the network was exposed, and the agency's reputation for infallibility was shattered. This failure had made Salameh more cautious, his security more formidable, and the Mossad more desperate. Conventional methods, such as fast-moving hit teams relying on fleeting intelligence, had proven ineffective and dangerously prone to error. Salameh was a ghost, protected by layers of bodyguards, constantly varying his routines, and, most problematically, maintaining a secret back-channel relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency, which afforded him a perceived layer of American protection that complicated any direct action. The hunt for Salameh had become more than a mission of vengeance. It was a matter of restoring the agency's credibility and closing a bleeding wound in the national psyche. To understand the complexity of the operation, one had to first understand the target. Ali Hassan Salameh was not a typical guerrilla commander hiding in the shadows. He was a paradox, a ruthless terrorist operative with the polished veneer of a Western-educated aristocrat. Born to a family revered in Palestinian circles, his father was a famed commander killed in the 1948 war. Salameh possessed an innate confidence and a powerful network of loyalists. He was fluent in German and English, had studied in Cairo and Moscow, and moved with ease in the affluent circles of Beirut, a city then known as the Paris of the Middle East. He drove sports cars, wore designer clothes, and in 1978 married Georgina Risk, a former Miss Universe, cementing his status as a high society figure. Yet beneath this playboy facade was a calculating and disciplined operational commander. He had personally overseen the logistics of the Munich attack, from the recruitment of the Fedayeen to their training and infiltration into Germany. As head of Force 17, he was responsible not only for Arafat's security, but also for the PLO's most sensitive intelligence operations. His security protocols were legendary. He never slept in the same place for more than 2 consecutive nights, constantly changed his vehicles, and employed decoy convoys. His routes were unpredictable, his meetings clandestine. Furthermore, his connection to the CIA, specifically with Agent Robert Ames, served as a powerful, if unofficial, shield. He provided the Americans with intelligence on radical Palestinian factions and acted as a liaison, a role that made him an invaluable asset to Washington in the chaotic landscape of Lebanese politics. This relationship led him to believe, perhaps fatally, that he was too useful to the Americans to be targeted by the Israelis. He was, in essence, a target wrapped in layers of physical security, operational discipline, and geopolitical complexity. A challenge that demanded a complete reimagining of Mossad's tactical doctrine. The failure at Lillehammer forced a radical strategic reassessment within Mossad's Caesarea department, which handled special operations. The old model of flying in a team for a quick kill was abandoned as too risky and unreliable against a target as disciplined as Salameh. The new proposal, championed by the legendary spy master Mike Harari, was audacious in its simplicity and patience. Instead of chasing the target, they would wait for the target to come to them. The plan was to embed a long-term intelligence asset in a fixed position with a direct line of sight to a location Salameh was known to frequent with some regularity. This asset would not be a trigger person in the traditional sense, but an observer, a human sensor whose sole job was to patiently build a comprehensive pattern of life analysis over many months. The killing mechanism would be a powerful car bomb, but its detonation would be contingent on a positive, real-time visual identification from the embedded observer. This method promised to eliminate the risk of misidentification that had plagued the Lillehammer operation. The primary obstacle was, of course, the observer herself. Finding an individual with the psychological fortitude to maintain a deep cover identity, alone in the heart of enemy territory for an extended period, was an immense challenge. West Beirut in 1978 was a fractured, paranoid city, a battleground for dozens of militias and intelligence agencies where a foreigner's presence was always scrutinized. The operative would need a flawless legend, impeccable language skills, and an iron will. Technical challenges were also significant. The remote detonation system for the bomb had to be powerful enough to transmit a clear signal through the dense urban environment of Beirut, yet sophisticated enough to be immune to electronic countermeasures and accidental triggering. The entire plan rested on the unshakable foundation of a single operative's ability to become a ghost in plain sight. A silent, patient predator waiting for the precise moment to strike. The woman selected for this critical role was a British citizen in her early 30s. Her true name and background remain one of the most closely guarded secrets in Israeli intelligence. But the operational identity created for her was Erica Mary Chambers. The process of her recruitment and preparation was exhaustive. She was not a career Mossad officer, but rather a civilian specifically chosen for this mission. A practice Mossad sometimes employed when a non-Israeli background was essential for the cover. It is believed she was motivated by a deep ideological conviction, possibly stemming from a personal connection to the Munich massacre or a prior history of Zionist activism. Her psychological profile, assessed over weeks by Mossad psychologists, revealed a rare combination of high intelligence, extreme patience, and an almost preternatural ability to compartmentalize emotion. She possessed what Mossad trainers called emotional coldness, the capacity to perform under immense, prolonged stress without betraying any outward sign of anxiety. Her training was tailored specifically for the Beirut environment. It went far beyond standard tradecraft. She underwent intensive Arabic language immersion, focusing on the specific Lebanese dialect. She was schooled in the complex social and political dynamics of West Beirut, learning to navigate the intricate web of allegiances between the PLO, Christian militias, Syrian forces, and various local factions. She received practical training in surveillance and counter-surveillance, dead drops, and secure communications. But most critically, she was conditioned for the profound isolation she would face. The handlers conducted simulations designed to test her legend under aggressive questioning and to inoculate her against the psychological erosion that inevitably accompanies deep cover assignments. The goal was not just to train an operative, but to fuse her completely with the identity of Erica Chambers. The construction of the Erica Chambers legend was a masterclass in operational artifice. It was built layer by layer, with each detail designed not only to be verifiable, but to actively support her mission. Her British citizenship was the cornerstone, providing a plausible reason for being a foreigner in Beirut without the immediate suspicion an American or French national might attract. Mossad's Documents Division created a comprehensive paper trail for her in the United Kingdom: a birth certificate, a passport with authentic entry and exit stamps from previous travels, a driver's license, and university records. A backstory was fabricated that cast her as a slightly bohemian, socially conscious individual with a degree in social work. This background organically led to the creation of her cover as a supporter of a UK-based charity for Palestinian refugees. This charitable angle was a stroke of genius. It provided an unimpeachable reason for her presence in a PLO-dominated area, gave her access to circles that might bring her closer to her target's orbit, and played into the Western liberal sympathies common among foreigners in Beirut at the time. Her artistic passion was another crucial element. It justified the long hours she would need to spend in her apartment, ostensibly painting from her balcony, which would in reality be her observation hide. To make this believable, she was trained to be a competent amateur painter, capable of producing canvases that would pass casual inspection. Even the choice of her apartment building was strategic. It was on Rue Verdun, a street Salome was known to use frequently to travel between his wife's apartment and his mother's home. The 8th floor vantage point provided a clear, unobstructed view of the street below, crucial for both observation and the line-of-sight detonation of the bomb. Finally, the detail of the cats was not incidental. They served multiple functions. They reinforced her image as a gentle, perhaps slightly lonely, caregiver. They provided a plausible reason for her to remain a homebody, and they became a social lubricant, allowing for casual, non-threatening interactions with neighbors who would see her feeding them in the alley. Every element of her life was a carefully placed piece of camouflage, designed to make her so normal, so utterly unremarkable, that she would become invisible. The technological and tactical components of the operation were prepared with parallel meticulousness. The primary weapon was a 1971 Volkswagen Beetle, chosen for its ubiquity on the streets of Beirut, which would allow it to be parked for days without attracting undue attention. The vehicle was acquired in Germany by a separate Mossad team and driven to a port city, where it was loaded onto a freighter bound for the Middle East. During transit, or perhaps in a clandestine workshop in a third country, the car was transformed into a sophisticated delivery system for a precisely engineered explosive device. Approximately 100 kilograms of high-grade plastic explosive, likely Semtex H, were carefully concealed within the vehicle's structure. The explosives were not placed in a single, crude block, but were molded and distributed into the door panels, under the seats, and along the chassis. This distribution was calculated by Mossad engineers to create a shaped charge effect. The goal was to direct the main force of the blast upwards and outwards in a specific cone, maximizing its destructive power on the target vehicle immediately beside it, while minimizing the horizontal blast radius to reduce collateral damage. A key lesson learned from past operations where civilian casualties had created political blowback. The detonation system was equally sophisticated. It consisted of a multi-channel radio receiver hidden deep within the car's electronics, linked to a series of electronic detonators. The trigger was a small, handheld transmitter disguised as a mundane object like a garage door opener or a pager. To prevent jamming or accidental detonation, the system used a frequency hopping signal, rapidly switching between several pre-programmed frequencies. Furthermore, it required a two-stage arming process. The bomb would be armed remotely by one operative shortly before the expected arrival of the target, and only then could the final detonation signal be sent by the observer. This redundancy was critical to ensure the weapon remained inert until the final, decisive moment. The entire package, the innocuous car, the hidden explosives, and the secure trigger, was a testament to Mossad's technical prowess. A silent, patient weapon waiting for a single command. In late 1978, with all the pieces in place, the operational phase began. Erika Chambers arrived at Beirut International Airport on a commercial flight, her new passport receiving an authentic Lebanese entry stamp. She passed through customs without incident, her luggage containing little more than clothes, art supplies, and a few personal effects that reinforced her cover story. She was met by a Ketsa, a Mossad field officer operating under a separate cover, who assisted her with the initial logistics of renting the apartment and establishing her residency. From that moment on, she was almost entirely on her own. Her insertion into the daily life of Rue Verdun was a slow, deliberate process. She did not rush. She spent the first few weeks establishing a baseline of normalcy, a predictable pattern of behavior that her neighbors would quickly come to accept. She made a point of being seen, but not of being noticed. She would greet the building's concierge with a polite bonjour, purchase her groceries from the same small shop each day, and take her canvases to a local framer. She joined a local charitable organization as a volunteer, which solidified her cover story and provided a plausible reason for her occasional absences from the apartment. The core of her work, however, took place in the solitude of her 8th-floor flat. For hours each day, she would sit by her balcony window, a canvas on an easel before her, a brush in her hand. But her eyes were not on the canvas. They were fixed on the street below. With a small, high-powered monocular, she watched. She kept a meticulous log, written in a coded shorthand, of all activity on the street. She noted the license plates of cars that passed regularly, the walking patterns of pedestrians, the schedules of the local police patrols. Her focus was on identifying the vehicles used by Salome's security detail, typically a pair of Chevrolet station wagons or Range Rovers. Her handlers had provided her with intelligence on his likely movements, but it was her job to refine this intelligence into a concrete, predictive pattern. The months that followed were a grueling test of psychological endurance. The execution buildup was not a period of escalating action, but of intense, monotonous waiting. Erica's life was a paradox of extreme tension and profound boredom. Days bled into weeks, and weeks into months. Salame was an elusive target. He would disappear for long stretches, traveling abroad, and when he was in Beirut, his movements remained erratic. There were countless false alarms. A convoy matching the description would appear, her heart would race, her hand would instinctively move closer to the concealed transmitter, only for the vehicles to pass by without him. Each day was a cycle of heightened alert, patient observation, and quiet disappointment. The isolation was the most difficult part. Her communication with her handlers was minimal and conducted through impersonal, prearranged signals and dead drops. She had no friends, no confidants. The persona of Erica Chambers was her only companion, and maintaining it required constant, exhausting mental effort. Every conversation with a neighbor, every phone call, every trip to the market was a performance. The strain was immense. Mossad psychologists had anticipated this, and her training had prepared her for it. But the reality of living under such pressure was a crucible. She used her art, the very prop of her cover, as a psychological release valve, pouring her anxiety and tension onto the canvas. The paintings she produced during this period, if they still exist, would be a fascinating record of a mind under unimaginable stress. As 1978 turned into 1979, the intelligence began to firm up. Through a combination of her direct observations and signals intelligence from other Mossad units, a clear pattern finally emerged. Salame had settled into a more regular routine, frequently traveling from his apartment on Rue Madame Curie to visit his mother, whose apartment was just off Rue Verdun. He was becoming predictable. The endgame was approaching. On January 22, 1979, the conditions were finally optimal. Intelligence confirmed that Salame was in Beirut and was expected to follow his established route that afternoon. The final phase of the operation was initiated with clinical precision. Earlier that morning, another Mossad operative, using the alias Peter Scriver, a British national who had entered Lebanon as a tourist, drove the booby-trapped Volkswagen Beetle and parked it in a carefully selected spot on Rue Verdun. The location was not random. It was at a slight bend in the road, a place where traffic naturally slowed, and it was directly in Erica's line of sight from her balcony window. After parking the car, Scriver locked it and walked away, heading directly to the airport for a flight out of the country. He was a ghost, a functional component of the machine who performed his task and vanished. Back in the 8th-floor apartment, Erica began her final preparations. There was no outward sign of the momentous event about to unfold. She made tea. She sat by her window, her painting in front of her. The concealed transmitter was on the small table beside her. A support team in a nearby location remotely sent the arming signal to the Volkswagen, activating the receiver. The trap was now live. The waiting was the hardest part. The street below was filled with the normal afternoon traffic of a bustling city. At 3:35 p.m., she saw them. 2 Chevrolet station wagons turned onto Rue Verdun. They were his vehicles. Through her monocular, she scanned the lead car. It was filled with his bodyguards. Then she focused on the second car. Salame was in the front passenger seat. He was unmistakable, his face clear and unobstructed. There was no doubt. The convoy proceeded down the street, closing the distance to the parked Volkswagen. The moment slowed. Time seemed to dilate. Erica's training took over, her actions detached and automatic. She watched the Chevrolet draw parallel to the Volkswagen. Her mind calculated the speed, the position, the optimal moment for detonation. As the passenger door where Salame sat aligned perfectly with the center of the booby-trapped car, she pressed the button on the transmitter. The detonation was instantaneous and devastating. A deafening roar tore through the afternoon calm of Rue Verdun, followed by a brilliant flash of orange and white. The force of the shaped charge performed exactly as the engineers had designed it. It ripped upwards and outwards, atomizing the Volkswagen and peeling open the side of the Chevrolet station wagon like a tin can. The blast wave shattered windows for blocks around and sent a plume of black smoke billowing into the sky. Ali Hassan Salame and 4 of his bodyguards were killed instantly. 4 innocent bystanders, including a British student and a German nun, were also killed in the blast, and 18 others were wounded, the unavoidable, brutal calculus of the operation. In her apartment, Erica did not watch the carnage. The moment she pressed the button, her mission was over. She calmly stood up, walked away from the window, and began her exfiltration procedure. There was no hesitation, no looking back. Her actions were as pre-planned and precise as the detonation itself. She had a small bag packed with a change of clothes, a different passport, and cash. She left the apartment, leaving behind the paintings, the cats, and the entire life of Erica Chambers. She walked down the 8 flights of stairs, avoiding the elevator, and exited the building into the chaos and confusion that now engulfed the street. The panic and screaming, the sirens, the crowds running towards the scene. It was all the cover she needed. She blended into the pandemonium and walked away, her pace steady and unremarkable. Her extraction route was pre-planned. She likely met a handler at a designated rendezvous point a few blocks away, was transferred to a vehicle, and driven to a prearranged safe house. Within hours, she and the remaining members of the support team were exfiltrated from Lebanon, most likely by sea, picked up by an Israeli naval vessel from a secluded stretch of coastline. By the time Lebanese authorities began their investigation, piecing together fragments of the Volkswagen and interviewing the shocked residents of Rue Verdun about the quiet British painter on the 8th floor, she was gone. Erica Chambers had ceased to exist as completely as if she had been consumed by the very explosion she had triggered. The aftermath of the operation was immediate and far-reaching. For the Palestine Liberation Organization, the assassination of Ali Hassan Salame was a catastrophic blow. They had lost not only their most brilliant operational commander and intelligence chief, but also a figure of immense symbolic importance. His death sowed paranoia and distrust within the PLO's leadership, as they launched a frantic and fruitless mole hunt to discover who could have provided the intelligence for such a perfectly executed attack. The investigation eventually traced the wreckage of the Volkswagen back to Germany. But the trail of ownership was a labyrinth of false names and shell companies that led nowhere. The legend of Erica Chambers was discovered. Neighbors described the quiet artist, but she had vanished without a trace, leaving behind an empty apartment and a few unfinished canvases. For Mossad and Israel, the operation was a resounding success, a triumph of patience, meticulous planning, and flawless execution. It was the final, bloody punctuation mark on Operation Wrath of God. The man who had masterminded the Munich massacre was dead, and the ghosts of the 11 murdered athletes had, in the eyes of the state, finally been avenged. The success restored the agency's aura of invincibility, which had been so badly tarnished by the Lillehammer affair. It sent an unequivocal message to Israel's enemies. that their reach was global, their memory was long, and their justice was inescapable. Politically, the repercussions were complex. The CIA lost its most important and controversial backchannel to the PLO, a loss that complicated American intelligence efforts in the region for years. Diplomatically, the assassination was condemned, but these condemnations were largely pro forma. In the clandestine world of intelligence, there was a grudging admiration for the sheer audacity and professionalism of the mission. The psychological cost to the operative who was Erica Chambers is unknowable. She was spirited back to Israel, debriefed, and then disappeared from the annals of Mossad history, her true identity protected by the state she served. One can only speculate on the long-term effects of her mission. To live for months as another person, in complete isolation, with the sole purpose of orchestrating another human being's death, is an experience that must inevitably leave a permanent scar on the psyche. She was transformed by the mission, first from a civilian into a highly specialized instrument of state policy, and then into a ghost, destined to live with the memory of the life she created and the lives she took on that Beirut afternoon. The story of Erica Chambers remains a stark case study in the nature of modern intelligence, a world where success is measured by the ability to turn a human being into a weapon, and where victory often comes at a profound moral and psychological price. Was the assassination of Ali Hassan Salameh, a confirmed terrorist leader, a justifiable act of state-sponsored retribution, or was it an extrajudicial killing that inevitably claimed innocent lives in its execution? How does a nation balance the demand for justice for its murdered citizens against the moral complexities of targeted assassinations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel.